Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. As his daughter Michelle told me, Bernie Warowitz was a great guy who was there for those who needed him. She said that he was a solution-oriented man who liked to help others problem solve, bringing out their best. Sherry, too, told me about his helpful nature, how he supported her and her children, but you likely knew that already. Because unlike so many of you, I did not know Bernie in life, only coming into contact with this family upon news of his death. I did have the opportunity, though, to spend some quality time with his children, with Michelle and with Mark and with Sherry, who shared with me aspects of who their father was, and I was moved. I was moved by his generosity of spirit, his caring nature, his incredible work ethic, his loving care for his late wife, Sandra of blessed memory, particularly at the end of her life during her illness, and much more. You are going to hear shortly from some of those who knew him best in life, who will share more pointedly than I ever could about the love shared within this family for Bernie Warowitz of blessed memory. You know, to set up the family call, I had an initial call with Sherry, and on that call, she shared with me about how active her father was before getting sick. I learned about an 80-something-year-old Bernie snow tubing, zip-lining, and riding horseback. And then later, from speaking to his children, I learned that he would walk the neighborhood of Downs Farms, making friends around the neighborhood who still would ask Sherry about him, wanting to know how he was doing. I learned about his furniture store in Chester with his brother, and the long hours and hard work it took to keep it going, to support the family. I learned about his love of the Philadelphia Eagles, who are doing very well now, and we're going to say that they're doing well in his honor and memory. His his love of grocery shopping for sport, a good diner, and his ability to cook a moist and delicious chicken or turkey breast, which should otherwise be dry if anyone else would make it. But more than all of that, it was his giving and supportive spirit that struck me the most. I learned that his wife Sandra worked for years at the Catch JCC, and Bernie worked at the welfare office later in life. And apparently, as the story goes, and many of you may be familiar with this story, a woman came into the welfare office and wasn't so kind to him, had a bad attitude, but he saw something in her that was special, and he encouraged her to apply for a job at the JCC, and he partnered with his wife Sandra, who helped her to prepare for the interview. The woman got the job, and it changed her life, and she attributed her well-being and security in large part to Bernie, who saw the goodness in her. This is the man that we come together today to honor and celebrate. So more formally, we gather today to honor the life, celebrate the memory, and mourn the loss of Bernard Warowitz, Beryl Ben Yosef, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. As I said, shortly you will hear more from those who knew him best in life, but my name is Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm a rabbi locally here in southern New Jersey, and it's an honor on behalf and representation of myself, my family, the funeral home, and the Jewish community to be here with all of you today. Bernie is predeceased, as I mentioned, by his wife Sandra, next to whom he will be interred shortly at the cemetery. May their souls be reunited in joy, as well as his late brother Benjamin, of blessed memory. He's survived by his children, his daughter Michelle and her husband Robert, his son Mark and his daughter Shari, and his grandchildren, Kimberly and her husband James, Michael and his wife Sarah, Lauren and her partner Matt, Joseph and his wife Michelle, Daniel and his partner Denise, Ellie and his wife Jen, Tammy and her husband James, and Louis. His sister Elaine and her late husband George, of blessed memory, and 10 great-grandchildren, and even one great-great-grandchild, and his sister-in-law Anita, as well as his caregivers who also meant so much. I pray I got every name correct. May your love and care and support for one another, God willing, carry you all through this difficult loss and transition. In the Jewish tradition, we learn that the physical body is temporary, but the soul is eternal. That is without end. So today, we gather for sacred purpose. We pray for the full and complete rest for Bernie's body, and we believe that his soul remains bound in the bond of life, and that's to each of you who carry his legacy forward. And we seek blessings for the continued elevation of his soul. May our time together today have purpose and deep meaning, and may it honor well the memory of Bernard Warowitz. So we have two mitzvot, two commandments that we're going to perform today. The first is the conclusion of the mitzvah of kavod hamet, of honoring the deceased. And that's the mitzvah that's performed from the moment of death through to interment at the cemetery. And for that, we keep our kavanah, we keep our intention on his memory, lifting up his soul. Closer to the conclusion of our time at graveside, through to visits and meals of consolation to follow, we perform the mitzvah of nichum avelim, of comforting the mourners, forming a community of consolation around them. I'm now going to read Psalm 23, a psalm used universally across the Abrahamic faith traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam at moments of loss and grief when other words fail us. I'm going to read it first in Hebrew, followed by a standard translation in the English. If you are comfortable and would like to in either language, and all are in part, you're welcome as you feel moved to join with me. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, binoteshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchoti nahaleni, nafshi yeshoveh v'ncheni b'maglei tzedek lama'an shemo, gam ki elech b'getz al mavet lo irara ki atay madi, shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged zorarai, Dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen v'amen. From Kohelet, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what has been planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time for speaking. This is a time for speaking. As I've mentioned, some members of the family have prepared words of a eulogy or a hesped, as we say in Hebrew, to lift up the honor and dignity of the deceased. We're going to hear first from his sister-in-law, Anita, then his granddaughter, Tammy, and then his son, Mark, who will read something on behalf of his granddaughter, Kim. So, Anita?
Goodbye to my sweet, always smiling brother-in-law Bernie. This world has lost one of the truly good guys. There are many people who come and go in our lives. A few touch us in ways that stay with us forever, making us better from knowing them. That is how Bernie was to me. Always pleasant, no matter what he was feeling, always a ready smile, always a person to share memories and laughs with. He has been in my family for most of my adult life. He came around our house in South Philly on Porter Street, a handsome ex-sailor and college boy trying to win the heart of my beautiful sister Sonny when I was about 14 years old. Well, not only did he succeed with Sonny, but he won the hearts of the whole family at the same time. He was part of my life through thick and thin, all of my adult life. He was a very hard worker, sometimes working 2 jobs to make sure his family was provided for. I, for one, never heard him complain. That was the Bernie I remember. He sent me a few cards years ago that I saved because they touched my heart so much. One of them reads, and I quote, "Dear Anita, when I was a teenager, I often wondered what my future would be like. Who would I marry, and would I be successful? 50 years later, I realized success is measured in different ways and in the eye of the beholder. I lucked out. Not only did I have a good wife that I adored, but loving and caring in-laws who were closer to me than if I were their own. You and your family will always be an important part of my life, and I will always be thankful for you. Love, Bernie." End quote. My family won the lottery when you became a part of us. You will be so very, very missed and always cherished.
Most people get a dad, and if you're one of the really lucky ones, you get a grandpop instead of a dad. I'm not sure there are words that can accurately describe our friendship or express the gratitude, love, and admiration I've always had for my grandfather. Sorry. I grew up with my grandpop, and as a little girl, I was always tagging along on his grocery store adventures or to the Berlin market. I would even third wheel it on breakfast dates with his good friend Franny. And he never hesitated to bring me along anywhere. He was always there, taking me to doctor's appointments if my mom couldn't, or driving me to high school if I missed the bus. He was there for all of my biggest moments in life and always had a pot of coffee waiting for us to share and talk over. I used to tell him he was my favorite old person. He'd do things like zip lining in Costa Rica, riding horses in the mountains of the Dominican Republic, and snow tubing in the Poconos. I was always amazed that my grandpa could do all of those things with us. My grandfather was a lot of things to a lot of people, but to me, he was my sweetest love, my friend, and my gramps. My grandfather was a neighborhood pop-up to everyone and to anyone across his path. He loved to talk and tell his stories, and they were the kind that always started with, "Back in my day, we used to," and I honestly loved to listen to every single one of them, especially the ones about the price of bread and a movie theater being like 5 cents. He loved history, coffee, and wore some of the best vintage sweaters. He was silly and fun and loved a really good belly laugh, the kind where you can't breathe and you start to cry and you laugh so hard. He loved a quality diner, his shows at the Pittman Theater, talking about how to invest money, sharing memories from the Navy, deep conversations about life, humming songs under his breath, watching CNN, reading the newspaper, where we'd like to gossip about the Dear Abby insert, and then he'd also save me the comic section. He loved a ripe grapefruit, neighborhood walks, eating tasty cakes in all of his sweets, hitting up Del Bono's first thing on a weekend morning, finding the best deals in all of the local grocery stores, and traveling. But most of all, he loved seeing his family come together. He was the person we'd all reach out to when we needed guidance. He was always there for everyone he loved. He was an honest, humble, and hardworking man, but mostly a proud man, always proud of his family no matter what. My grandfather had the biggest and softest heart, and was the kind of person who would give the shirt off his back and expect nothing in return. He was truly someone special to all of us. What I'll miss most about my grandfather is his gentle, loving presence. Our coffee diner dates, our deep talks about life, our laughs, his advice, and holding his hand and knowing that he would always be there. I promise to keep the memory of you alive, Grandpa, for as long as I live. And I'll speak of you often, and I will always share our memories with Mackenzie. I will see you when I see you, another place and another time, but I will miss you forever. I really will. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Since my daughter Kim's unable to make it, being she lives all the way in Indiana, she wanted me to write she wrote something for me to read. What can I say about my grandfather that already hasn't been said? He was a man of many words. He just loved to talk about everything. As a young kid, I used to sit with him as he watched his old cowboy or war movies that he loved. He would talk to me about his childhood, the odd jobs he had, and being a young man in the Navy. I hung on to his every word, and even though I heard the same stories over and over, it was told just a little different each time. I would play those little movies in my head, and my imagination would soar. Another fond memory I have of my grandfather was every Sunday he would gather his coupons and head to the supermarket, sometimes before sunrise, to hit the sales at the market. So as a young kid, I would listen for him to get up, and I would quickly get dressed and sneak downstairs, knowing he would let me tag along and spoil me. I would always come home with a fresh hot bagel and a pocket full of Brock's candy after giving me a handful of nickels to drop into the donation box. As I grew up and became a mother of my own, my family stepped in to help me as a single mother. My grandfather, now retired, but never able to sit still, he would help me by getting my 2 young children up and off to school each morning as I slept because I worked at night. Sometimes I would be fully asleep. I wouldn't be fully asleep, and I would listen to his gentle voice get my kids ready for school. My grandfather was a grandfather, a brother, an uncle, a grandfather, and a friend to all he met. Always a smile and a wave, and a "how are you doing?" I can see the smile on his face now as he meets with my grandmother, as she waited almost 28 years to be reunited. He will be missed as much as he is loved. Thank you.
It's with these beautiful memories and dedications in mind that we now move to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Malei Rachamim, which asks that as we prepare to inter Bernie at the cemetery shortly, that his soul be granted true rest, excuse me, on the wings of God's divine presence. I'll read it first in the English translation, followed by chanting in the Hebrew. And if it's comfortable physically for you to do so, I invite you to please rise. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Bernard Warowitz, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace, and let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Beryl Ben Yosef, Shehalach la'olamo, ba'avor shenadvu tzedakah, ba'ad hazkarat nishmato, b'gan eden tehe menuchato, lachen ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seiter kenafav la'olamim. Bitzror, bitzror hachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach al mishkavo b'shalom, Vinomar, Amen. Please be seated. Our time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. Immediately following our time here, those going to the cemetery, we will make our way in processional to Shalom Memorial Park in Pennsylvania. The family also asks that donations in lieu of flowers to please be made to one of 2 organizations that the family holds dear, Home for Our Troops at HFOT, as in Home for Our Troops, USA.org, or the Michael J. Fox Foundation. That's Home for Our Troops or the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Additionally, the family welcomes extended family and friends for visits and a meal of consolation following interment back here in Cherry Hill at Tutti Toscani at 1491 Brace Road in Cherry Hill. That's 1491 Brace Road in Cherry Hill. Psalm 91.